institutions have been staying away from Palantir. If they got included in the S&P 500, it would force a lot of those institutions to buy shares of the stock.
The great Palantir debate continues. Is this stock overpriced, or is this week's earnings report further proof that the stock is surging for good reason? Let's dive in. It was a good Tuesday for Palantir stock after the company's strong earnings report sent the stock up more than 11%, even before the market opened. Our MarketBeat analysts Chris Markoch and Thomas Hughes are here to join us to walk through what's behind this boost in Palantir stock, even during this difficult week in the market. Chris, let's start with you. Let's talk about some of the main highlights that you're finding from Palantir's earnings report today.
Well, it was a great earnings report for Palantir by almost any measure that you can consider. So let's just start on the top line. So revenue was came in at $678 million. That beat analysts' expectations by about 4%, 3.9, I think it was. But it was also 27% higher year over year. And that revenue that they're getting is not only coming from their government contracts, which was up about 24%, but it was also coming from the commercial side of the business, which has been where analysts have wanted to make sure the growth was coming from, and that grew by 55%. Some other notable things is the company closed 27 deals valued at over $10 million. Their customer count increased by 41% in the quarter. And the company delivered another profitable quarter of 9 cents per share. That was beating expectations by only a cent. But what was notable was that they were at a penny a share just the year prior. So that's tremendous earnings growth in 1 year. And then just as sort of the cherry on top, they also raised guidance for both revenue and earnings, not only for the coming quarter, but also for the rest of the year.
For sure, a lot going on for Palantir right now. We're excited to watch this one. Thomas, do you think Palantir's revenue report justifies this near $30 stock price that we're seeing right now?
Yeah, I think I do. It's a pretty good report. I agree with Chris on everything that he said. One of the things that he didn't touch on is that the company is building momentum. All right, revenue and profitability growth accelerated sequentially and year over year. So it's not just doing well, it's doing better sequentially and on year over year basis. And the guidance and the other internal metrics suggest that will continue to go. Like you said, commercial and government sides of the business are both firing. One thing that the company itself pointed out was the rule of 40, and that's just a rule of thumb, kind of a metric to see how profitable the growth is and how investable the stock is. And the rule of 40 is that the growth rate plus the profit margin should be at least 40%. Their rule of 40 number is 64%. 50% better than the expectation. I think that's a good metric. I think that's got a lot to do with why the stock price is moving up.
Now, as you kind of just mentioned, like a lot of AI companies, Palantir has seen some pretty significant year-over-year growth here. Is that growth enough to help Palantir make it into the S&P 500, though?
I can't tell you I know the answer. I wish I knew.
Well, why
That would
not,
make
Chris?
that would make it a lot easier to invest in the stock if I did. But what this does do is it does push the ball into the S&P's court. The chief financial officer for Palantir said as much. He said really it's in their hands. The concern that people had about Palantir a couple of quarters ago, when they became eligible for the S&P 500 was just what Thomas was saying about the momentum of earnings. Not just could they be profitable, but could they continue to grow this profitability at a significant rate? And the company is certainly showing that it's doing that, and it's forecasting that to continue. So I really do think this is more a question of it's in the S&P 500's court. However, I know that for Palantir to come in, somebody else has to go out, and I don't know if there's enough reason to move another company out ahead of Palantir. That I don't know, Lacey.
So I want to talk about that just a little bit more here. Tell us more, why has the company been rejected by the S&P 500? What is it, twice now? Thomas, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, like Chris said, it's really hard to say. The S&P people had their decisions. It does present a conundrum because the company does meet all the requirements. One of the reasons might be, though, that there is already a lot of tech in the S&P 500. It's about 42% tech. Like Chris said, we got to get rid of somebody for Palantir to come in. And even if they were to remove some other company that wasn't tech, they would probably not put Palantir in because they're going to increase the concentration into tech. Possibly also it's because the analysts are still poo-pooing the stock. Some of them have good targets and good sentiment ratings, but a lot of them don't. The stock is still pegged at reduced. The price target assumes downside. So there is still some lingering concerns that could be affecting the decision.
Now, Chris, Palantir has really struggled with mixed reviews for quite a while now. So, even as this week's earnings report shows some strong revenue growth, as we've talked about, why are analysts so mixed on this stock?
So I'm gonna try to avoid being cynical. I'll get my zinger out of the way first, and I think it's because a lot of analysts missed Palantir when it was trading below $10 a share. But I think a more thoughtful maybe response to that, Lacey, is even if you've been trying to study Palantir and follow Palantir for a while, it's a hard company to understand. And that's not a criticism of the company. It's just it's not just a software company. It's not just a data analytics company. There's a lot to understand. And so it's easy for analysts to try to put Palantir into a bucket where it may not necessarily fit totally. And I think that's really what's going on. And I think that's also why analysts really don't believe that Palantir can justify its current valuation, because they're looking at it and they're trying to say, but if we compare it to company X over here or company Y over here, we don't see where they can generate that type of growth. And I'm not sure if that's an accurate comparison for the stock.
Thomas, let's go into this a little bit more here. Just how widespread are some of the analyst predictions on the future price target for Palantir?
Well, I would say that the analysts are incredibly mixed on this
Mhm.
stock. There is really no conviction in the range of ratings or price targets. The range goes from sell to strong buy. The consensus is reduce, which is odd for such a high performing business. All the targets run from 750 to 335, which is a huge range. Or actually from 750 to 38 because there's now a new high. But the revisions that came out since the report was released, run from 9 to 38. So it's not narrowing, but it is rising, right? So still no conviction, but they feel a little bit better about it. And the consensus, like I mentioned, 2250 is 15% downside. And that's just like, why is that?
All right, well, we know where the analysts stand on this one, but I want to know where both of you fall on your future predictions for the success of this company and even the stock price. Chris, what are your thoughts for the future predictions?
Well, Lacey, you know that I'm bullish on Palantir, and we'll just say for full disclosure for the viewers that are watching this, I do have a position in Palantir, but that's not the reason why I'm really bullish on the stock. As a matter of fact, Lacey, when I say the stock is hard to understand, I was on the sidelines, doing my due diligence for probably a couple of years before I decided to stick my toe into Palantir. Um, let's be clear, the current rally, or I should say the rally that happened after earnings and into the better part of the day yesterday, was fueled by traders who were looking at an opportunity. They couldn't resist buying Palantir when it was trading around $22 and change on Monday. They bought it ahead of earnings, and that was a great trade for them. I've seen Palantir, I think, is coming down just a little bit off of those Tuesday highs even now. So to me, it just says there were some retail traders getting in and getting out fast, and that's fine. That's part of the market. Um, as far as future price predictions, I'm not sure I'm quite as bullish as Dan Ives of Wedbush. He's the one that has the highest price target of 38, and he's moved that from 30 to 35 and now to 38. One metric that I looked at was the company announced that they had a free cash flow of, I don't know, it was between 800, it was 800 million and a billion, somewhere in there. And their free cash flow margin was between 29% and 36%. That would suggest the company's market cap is undervalued by about 20%. And if you put that onto the stock, that means maybe somewhere around 32 might be a realistic price target just from that fundamental basis alone.
Thomas, Chris is bullish on this stock. Do you agree with him, or do you have a little bit of a different perspective here?
No, I'm bullish on this stock, but I think the rally will be a slow grind higher and not a massive rally like we've seen in some of the tech stocks over the last year or so. Earnings are growing, but I think the valuation is a bit of a concern right now because it could be 5 or 6 or 7 years for it to grow into a reasonable valuation range. However, that is offset by momentum and acceleration. The company could definitely blossom over the next year, so there is a potential catalyst in that. Right now, it's kind of wait and see. Is it going to be that slow grind, or will these catalysts start to present themselves in the results?
Now, Chris, what would it mean for the stock if it did make it into the S&P 500? Would this be a catalyst, or what would we see as a result of that?
I think it would absolutely be a catalyst. And the reason why, Lacey, is because Palantir right now, only about 45% of the stock's float is owned by institutional investors. And that's been sort of the thing ever since the company went public in 2020 is institutions have been staying away from Palantir. If they got included in the S&P 500, it would force a lot of those institutions to buy shares of the stock, and that would bring the share price up pretty considerably from where it is now.
Right. The S&P 500 is a very widely followed index,
Yeah.
not just the SPY index tracking ETF, but many other indexes and funds are based on the S&P 500. So when Palantir is included, like he says, they'll all be forced to buy it in order to remain indexed to the S&P 500.
Well, thank you both for your perspectives and the deep dive into Palantir's earnings report this week. We're going to continue to follow which analyst predictions come true for this company, and of course, much more right here on MarketBeat. Until next time, happy investing.